disgruntled fans. Attendance was down in any number of great baseball towns. The game was being played in loudly aging football stadiums. Television ratings were down. The baseball network, a much heralded venture between ABC and NBC, was a failure. Competitiveness was down. Big market, big money teams bludgeoned their way to the top of the standings, leaving legions of great fans without any real hope for success. And beneath the surface, a terrible scandal of performance-enhancing drug was developing, a scandal so pervasive it would ultimately take baseball off the sports page and onto the front page. A reasonable observer might have concluded that baseball, like professional boxing or thoroughbred racing before it, was destined for an unstoppable decline. With that as his to-do list, Selig got to work. First, labor. Baseball has long had legendarily bad labor relations. The last 8 negotiations for a collective bargaining agreement have ended in a strike or a lockout. In 2002, with Commissioner Selig sitting at the table, we had the first CBA in a generation without a work stoppage. And in 2006, we had another piece of the CBA, this time months before the threat of a strike or a lockout. Second, attendance. Baseball set another record attendance in 2006 with more than 76 million tickets sold. Now more than half the stadium in the country are new baseball-only jewels. In the Bay Area, we are particularly proud of AT&T Park and the just-announced Cisco Field. Third, growth. Baseball revenue was $1.3 billion in 1994 and $5.2 billion last year. One of the key measures in business is compound annual growth rate, or CAGR. Baseball's CAGR is an eye-popping 12.25%. If we're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, we'd be one of the hot growth stocks. Fourth, innovation. Baseball was generally regarded as the sport that was most reluctant to change. Yet in the past decade, we've seen the true innovations in baseball. The World Baseball Classic, interleague play, and the very successful introduction of wild-card players. It's safe to say that baseball has transformed itself from an institution that resisted change to one that embraces it. Fifth, integrity. Commissioner Selig has been unyielding. Baseball needs to get clean. In the face of what was reported to be significant opposition, the Commissioner insisted on strong, transparent, and enforceable drug testing. He was able to frame the issue not as management versus labor, but as baseball against the profit and baseball. Finally, competitiveness. One of baseball's proudest boasts has to be that in the past 7 years, there have been 7 different world champions. There are children now in the first grade who have never lived in a world where the Yankees have celebrated a world championship. Of course, there's still significant work to be done in strengthening competitiveness in baseball, but we need to recognize how far we've come. But for all the adjectives we can come up with to describe Commissioner Selig, one that never comes to mind is gourmet. Here is a man who can dine every day on a test for a Grand Prix, but who chooses every day to dine on a hot dog and a Diet Pepsi at the fabled Gillies frozen custard stand in Milwaukee. To make you feel more at home today, Commissioner, we have flown in a Gillies custard dessert, and we hope you enjoy it. With that, we'd like to introduce our special guest today, a man who has truly given everything of himself for the game of baseball, and the game is better off for it. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Selig.
Pleasure to be here today, and you have made me feel right at home. I am, as my wife would attest, a creature of habit. But after you've eaten this frozen custard today, you'll now know why I eat it every single day. It is that good. Well, I know this is my, Jeff, third appearance here. Hard to believe that it was 5 years from the last time I was here. Shows you how time can go by so fast when you're having fun. But Jeff's covered the things I want to say, but let me at the outset. This sport has never been more popular. By any criteria that you could use, whether it's our attendance, think about something. My father always used to say to me, nothing is ever good or bad except by comparison. 535,000. Our attendance was stunning. There are a lot of reasons for that. I really think if you were to ask me what is the primary reason, it's labor peace. My first meeting was in April of 1970. I was a kid from Milwaukee, and Bowie Kuhn, then commissioner, said, we're having a meeting in New York and you have to come. Well, I was excited. I came. He sat me down in between Phil Wrigley of the Cubs and Gussie Bush of the St. Louis Cardinals. Mr. Bush had broken his ankle and he had a cane, and it was all about labor, and he kept smashing the cane in the floor. I thought I was going to get caned, frankly, before the afternoon was over. It was about labor. It was about the players' pension. I've never seen so much anger, and I've never seen so much hatred. And I must tell you, it took 2.5 decades or more for that to leave. And I remember as we prepared for the 2002 negotiation, I kept saying to our people, and to Don Fair and others, look, we have taken the greatest sport in the world and besmirched it every day with hatred. The owners did this. Owners used to rep owners. Owners used to rep players. Owners used to rep the Players Association. Players Association used to rep the owners. And of course, everybody repped the commission. Well, our fans, quite frankly, got tired of that. And I don't blame them. And so, when you look back on it, and if you remember the labor negotiations, and there are a lot of people sitting in this room, Ray will remember those negotiations of the 70s, filled with anger and every single day finger pointing. This year, we did surprise everyone. Started in April and concluded in October. Quietly, nobody knew there was negotiations going on. And as a result, this sport has been able to grow. We have 22 new ballparks since I took over as commissioner, either built or about to be built. We have the 2 in New York, and we have the 1 in Minnesota going up. So the thing has been remarkable. I remember in 1992, when I thought I'd taken this job for 2 to 4 months, the gross revenue of the sport was $1.2 billion. Now you must understand, baseball I often describe as a social institution. And social institutions by their nature are resistant to change. They have these indigenous characteristics that people say, well, we can't do it that way. And I remember in 1993 when you knew that this sport had for some reason for 2.5 decades had just been sitting there in the status quo. And so the first thing I said to myself is, how are we going to get this $1 billion to someday to $2 billion? And it was obvious as we kept expanding that we needed to go to a wild card. Well, I can remember, and there may be some members of the media here who thought that was the most destructive idea they'd ever heard. We finally passed it in September of 1993, and you would have thought at that time I had to file a bill. It was just brutal. Oh, the conversation, and this is a joke, and so on and so forth. Today, 97% of our fans love it, and you can all ask yourself all the great things that have happened. What would have been happening if we didn't have interleague play? And I know there are some people who will be sometimes critical of this and that. I first heard about interleague play as a kid, listening to Bill Beck and Hank Greenberg talk about it. And they kept asking, why don't we have some form of interleague play? Because baseball, as an institution, was resistant to change. By 1973, we finally, in my 3rd year in baseball, I was the American League representative, and I thought we had some interleague play, and unfortunately never went anywhere because the National League turned it down. And so in 1996, we finally passed interleague play. It has been tremendous. because it adds spark during the season, it gives people a chance to see it. The attendance figures obviously are tremendous. But more important than that, when you put all these things together, that's why attendance has increased the way it has. It's one thing to protect the history of this sport. The history of this sport is unparalleled. I'm very sensitive. It is the thing that makes baseball unique. It is also the thing that makes baseball as popular. And I think our fans as passionate as they are. But the fact of the matter is, as we move towards the 21st century and now into the 21st century, there was change that was needed. There was change that had to take place. And so, whether it was the wild card, the unbalanced schedule, there were things that had to be done, and fortunately they worked wonderfully well. In the 90s, there was a new word, disparity. Didn't matter when I was a kid growing up. It was Aaron of the Braves, Busey of the Cardinals, Williams of the Red Sox, DiMaggio, Mallon of the Yankees. Didn't matter. But all of a sudden, in the early 90s, I think it actually started in the late 80s, it did matter. And as disparity grew, our problems grew. You know, when I was president of the Milwaukee Club, I used to go around the state of Wisconsin and give a speech in which I talked about, and I give the same speech to the owners at every meeting. They want to hear about it. Hope and faith. It's our job to provide hope and faith in as many places as is possible. That's what will make the sport great. Well, by the 90s, we were in considerable trouble with that. Revenue sharing was an open. It was a term. We had a meeting in Boulder, Wisconsin, in August of 1993. It might have been the ugliest meeting that I've ever been to. And I knew then, slowly but surely, we were going to have to do this. After all, Pete Rozelle was a 33-year-old commissioner in 1961 of the National Football League, under entirely different circumstances, showed people how important it was. Not only for the economics, but for what I call the sociological value of hope and faith. Well, this year, I'm happy to say, slowly but surely through the 90s, through a lot of criticism. A lot of criticism from time to time that I didn't particularly like, but I understood that it went not only with the territory, but more importantly, it went with change. This year we'll share over $343 million. Remarkable story. So that I can stand here today and tell you that I think that even amongst the small market teams, that they get enough help that everybody, if their management is properly done, have a chance. Now, do we have work to do? Of course we do. We have other rules, we have a tax, we have other things. But the objective was not only economic, but it was what I call competitive balance. The NFL people call it parity. Doesn't matter, the same thing. Somebody asked me the other day, well, how do you judge parity? Or as you call it, competitive balance? Well, how I judge it is on Labor Day of every year. I take account, I do this all year long, but if Labor Day becomes meaningful, how many teams are still in contention for either a wild card berth or a division championship? This year there were 18. And as far as I'm concerned, that really proved the point. I don't think baseball has ever had more parity or competitive balance than it has today. Is revenue sharing the primary reason? I believe it is. I want an example. 3 years ago, the Detroit Tigers lost 119 games. I know that's a bad word to give to people, but I got to bring it up anyway. This year, they won the American League Championship. Could not have happened in the 90s. And you had Oakland and Minnesota and a whole series of other clubs. So I feel good about where we are. This meteoric rise in attendance is not accidental. As I said, yes, there's work to be done, but I think we've confronted all our problems. Given our new economic landscape, given everything we do, clubs, no matter what we do at a local level and at a national level, club cannot survive if it's playing in a stadium that can't produce sufficient revenue. I know there are people in various locales that don't always like to hear my message, but it's a fact. You could bring Branch Rickey, the greatest baseball executive of all time, back, and he can't survive if his revenue is 1/3 or 1/4 of what other clubs have. And so we have very few problems left. I'm very hopeful that Mr. Wolf and the Oakland people are going to solve their problems finally and move forward, because it's imperative if people in that area want a competitive club. We have 22 new stadiums when all these are completed, and certainly it has provided the impetus, to the surge in popularity. What do I see as the great new horizon? It's international. Again, baseball was resistant to change. Before the World Baseball Classic, even a year ago, if I had been here a year ago, all I heard was criticism. Oh, you can't do that, players are going to get hurt, this and that, they'll be worn out, it won't work, it doesn't work, it can't work. Frankly, I was used to hearing that because I heard about the wild card, I heard about revenue sharing, I heard about interleague plays, so I'm never surprised. But it was, I heard from some owners who were very unhappy. My poor friend George Steinbrenner was convinced that half his team was going to get wiped out, and maybe this was just a plot to make sure that that happened. Well, what happened? I remember sitting in my office when the first game was played between Venezuela and the Dominican Republic, and I was nervous. I was as nervous as I was before the first wild card or the first interleague play game, because as confident as I am about these things, until it actually works, because I know who's going to get blamed, frankly, if it doesn't. Well, in the first inning, if you'll remember, David Ortiz hit a home run off of Johan Santana. And I watched the celebration in the stands, and I watched the celebration on the field. And you'd have thought the Boston Red Sox beat the Yankees again to win the American League pennant. But I knew then that the classic would work. So all the way through San Diego to the final, it was just a thrill to watch people in the stands, to watch the things that went on. You know, in the end, you try to do things that somebody talked before about how baseball can bring people together. And I tell you of a little incident to that. I just think about it now while I'm talking. On a beautiful March Sunday in Scottsdale, the USA team was playing South Africa. And I went out early, and I don't like to go to clubhouses early before games, having to run a team, but everybody around me convinced I should. I went in and thanked everybody who was playing for the USA team. And it was terrific. We had the largest crowd in history that Sunday.